My sister demanded I babysit her kids while she goes on an 8-week vacation. When I threatened to report her to the police, she arranged to have me assaulted in my own home so she could take them back. For as long as I can remember, the universe of our family revolved around two suns with vastly different gravitational pulls. I was the quiet, predictable planet, the one who followed a stable orbit. My life was a testament to planning. A degree in accounting, a steady climb up the corporate ladder at a respectable firm, a mortgage on a sensible 3-bedroom house in a quiet suburban neighborhood. I was the responsible one. Then there was Jessica, my younger sister. Our parents called her a free spirit. It was a gentle, loving euphemism for a human-shaped Category 5 hurricane. Where I built, she demolished. Her life was a chaotic highlight reel of burned bridges, fired jobs, and spectacularly failed relationships. She didn't just live for the moment, she torched the future and danced in the ashes, confident that someone else would always be there to sweep them up. That someone was always me. My parents were the architects of this dynamic. Their love for Jessica was blind, deaf, and tragically dumb. They saw her destructive impulsiveness as charming spontaneity. Her inability to hold a job was a sign of her creative soul refusing to be tied down. Her constant need for financial bailouts was just, well, Jessica being Jessica. And my stability? That wasn't seen as an achievement to be celebrated. It was seen as a resource to be tapped. "You're the strong one, Sarah," my mother would say, her voice soft and full of that weaponized guilt I knew so well. "You have to help your sister. Family takes care of family." But the definition of family in our house was a one-way street. It meant I gave, and Jessica took. And she took with the shameless entitlement of a queen demanding tribute. My greatest kindness, the thing I look back on with the most complicated mix of love and regret, was my relationship with her two children, my nephew Liam, who was 8, and my niece Qley, who was 6. They were wonderful, bright, funny kids, the innocent bystanders in the wreckage of their mother's life. And for years, I was their unpaid, on-call, 24/7 crisis center. My phone would buzz at 10 o'clock on a Wednesday night. "Hey, Sarah, so, crisis. The sitter bailed. You don't mind watching the kids, do you? Just for a few hours." A crisis, for Jessica, was never a medical emergency or a work disaster. It was a last-minute concert ticket, a third date with a guy she'd met on an app 2 days ago, or an impromptu, girls' night out. My own life, my need for sleep before a big presentation, my plans with friends, my simple desire to just exist in my own quiet home, was irrelevant. If I ever hesitated, the guilt trip would begin. "Oh, so you're too busy for your own niece and nephew? I just thought you loved them." Of course, I loved them. I adored them. And Jessica used that love as a lever to pry open my life and my wallet whenever she pleased. I didn't see them as a burden. I saw them as two beautiful souls who deserved stability, and I was the only one providing it. I would drop everything, drive the 20 minutes to her messy apartment, and step into the chaos. Liam would often have his homework spread on the floor because the table was covered in Jessica's discarded clothes, and Qley would be watching TV with the volume on high to drown out whatever argument Jessica was having on the phone. They would run to me, their little arms wrapping around my legs, and for a few hours, I could give them a pocket of peace. We'd do homework, read stories, and I'd make sure they were bathed and tucked into bed at a reasonable hour. Jessica would waltz in sometime after midnight, smelling of cheap wine and perfume, offering a breezy, "Thanks, you're a lifesaver," before disappearing into her room. She treated me less like a sister who was doing her an immense favor and more like a service provider she didn't have to pay. The unpaid babysitting was just the tip of the iceberg. The financial drain was constant. 2 years ago, she totaled her car. It wasn't an accident, it was a consequence. She'd been out drinking, got behind the wheel, and wrapped the sedan around a telephone pole. By some miracle, no one else was hurt, and by some feat of parental intervention and a high-priced lawyer they paid for, she dodged a DUI conviction. It was swept under the rug as a scare that would surely teach her a lesson. It didn't. A week later, she was at my door, her face a mask of manufactured despair. She couldn't get to work, she couldn't take the kids to school. Her life was over. My parents called me that night. "Sarah, you have good credit," my dad said, his voice heavy with false authority. "You need to co-sign a car loan for her. She can't get one on her own. She's a proven reckless driver, Dad. She could have killed someone. She needs to take the bus and learn some responsibility." The response was swift and predictable. "Don't be so cruel, Sarah. She's your sister. She's learned her lesson. Are you going to let your niece and nephew suffer because you want to be stubborn?" So I did it. I sat in a stuffy dealership office and signed my name next to hers, chaining my pristine credit score to her sinking ship. She made the first 2 payments. I made all the rest. Then there was the time she quit her job as a receptionist because, and I quote, her boss looked at her funny. She didn't have another job lined up. She had no savings. She just walked out. That month, I got a frantic call from her landlord. The rent was late. When I confronted Jessica, she was completely nonchalant. "Oh, yeah, I'll figure it out. The universe will provide." The universe, in this case, was me. My parents loaned me the money, which was just a pass-through. They gave it to me, so they could tell themselves they weren't directly enabling her, and I paid her rent for 3 months until she found another job she'd inevitably quit 6 months later. Each time, I was the bad guy for pointing out the pattern, for suggesting therapy or a financial planner. I was judgmental. I was unsupportive. I wasn't letting her live her authentic life. My role was clear. I was to be the silent, reliable, ever-giving foundation upon which Jessica could build her sandcastles, and when the tide of her irresponsibility came in and washed them away, I was to be there, ready to provide a fresh patch of sand. My parents were the cheerleaders on the shore, clapping for the shoddy construction and telling me to stop being so negative about the incoming waves. For my entire adult life, this was my normal. A simmering pot of resentment I kept pushing to the back burner of my mind, telling myself it was for Liam and Qley. I was the strong one. I could handle it. Until the day I couldn't. It was a Tuesday. A perfectly ordinary, gray, drizzly Tuesday in March. I had just gotten home from a long day at work, fantasizing about a hot bath and a quiet evening with a book. My fantasy was shattered by a frantic ringing of my doorbell. I opened the door to find Jessica standing on my porch. Not just Jessica. She had 2 large suitcases at her feet, and Liam and Qley were standing behind her, looking small and bewildered. Liam was clutching his well-worn teddy bear, and Qley was nervously twisting the hem of her jacket. "Hey," Jessica said, breezing past me into my immaculate foyer, dragging her suitcases with her. She didn't wait for an invitation. "Okay, so, amazing news. You know that new guy I'm seeing, Stefan? Well, he's just incredible. He's a life coach and a photographer, and he thinks I have a repressed artistic soul." I just stared at her, a cold knot forming in my stomach. "What's going on, Jessica? What's with the suitcases?" She beamed, a smile so wide and self-satisfied it didn't reach her eyes. "That's the amazing news. Stefan and I are going on a spiritual journey. 8 weeks. We're backpacking through Southeast Asia. Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia. We leave Friday. It's all very spontaneous and magical." The knot in my stomach tightened. I looked from her ecstatic face down to the anxious faces of her children. 8 weeks? "Jessica, what about Liam and Qley? What about their school?" She waved a dismissive hand, as if I were bringing up a trivial detail like the weather. "Well, that's why I'm here, silly. You'll be watching them. It'll be like a fun, long sleepover." She didn't ask. She announced it. A unilateral decision about her children's lives and, by extension, mine. 8 weeks. 40 working days. Nearly 2 months of my life, my career, my home, commandeered without a single shred of discussion. She expected me to become a full-time, single parent overnight so she could go find her artistic soul with a man she'd known for a month. Something inside me, a steel girder that had been bending and groaning under years of pressure, finally snapped. The word came out, quiet and unfamiliar, yet heavier than any I'd ever spoken. "No." Jessica's smile froze and then melted away, replaced by a look of sheer disbelief, as if her pet dog had just recited Shakespeare. "What did you say?" I said, "No, Jessica. I can't. I won't. I have a demanding job. I have commitments. I am not your contingency plan. They are your children, and you don't get to abandon them for 2 months to go on a vacation. The disbelief curdled into rage. Her eyes, usually sparkling with flighty charm, turned into hard, cold stones. You are kidding me, right? It's for 8 weeks, Sarah, not a lifetime. Don't be so dramatic. I need this. This is important for my personal growth. Your personal growth, I repeated, my own voice rising, fueled by years of suppressed anger. Does your personal growth involve abandoning your kids? Does it involve considering their needs for even 1 second? They need their mother. They need stability, not a glorified babysitter while their mom gallivants across the globe. You're just jealous, she shrieked, her voice echoing in my pristine hallway. Liam flinched. You're jealous because I'm actually living my life, and you're stuck in this boring, pathetic little box you call a life. I looked at my beautiful, boring, stable home. I looked at the 2 terrified children caught in the crossfire. And I looked at my sister, the entitled, selfish vortex of chaos. Get out, Jessica, I said, my voice dangerously calm. Pack up your spiritual journey and get out. If you leave your children here, if you abandon them on my doorstep, I will have no choice but to call the police and report you to Child Protective Services for child abandonment. This is not a threat. It is a promise. For a moment, she looked like she might explode. But then, a strange, chilling transformation occurred. The hot rage vanished, replaced by an icy calm. A slow, cold smile spread across her lips. It was a smile I had never seen before, and it made the hair on my arms stand up. You'll regret that, she whispered, the words slithering into the air between us. Then she turned, grabbed Liam and Qley by their wrists without a word, and dragged them back out into the rain. She didn't put her suitcases in her car. She left them there, in my foyer, like a promise of her return. I watched her peel out of my driveway, leaving me shaking in the silence of my home, the cold dread of her final words hanging in the air. For 3 days, the silence was deafening. The suitcases sat in my hall like unexploded bombs. I called her phone a dozen times. It went straight to voicemail. I called my parents, who told me I was being cruel and unreasonable, that Jessica was deeply hurt by my ultimatum. They didn't know where she was, but they were sure she was just cooling off. I called Liam's school on Thursday. They said he hadn't been in all week. The knot of dread in my stomach had grown into a writhing mass of terror. I was picturing them in a motel somewhere, or worse. I was on the verge of filing a missing persons report. Then, on Friday night, my world ended. It happened around 2 a.m. I was jolted from a restless sleep by a sound that no homeowner ever wants to hear. The splintering crack of a door frame giving way. My heart instantly hammered against my ribs. I sat bolt upright in bed, straining to listen over the blood pounding in my ears. Footsteps. Heavy. 2 sets of them, moving through my downstairs living room with a terrifying confidence. I fumbled for my phone on the nightstand, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip it. Before I could even dial 911, my bedroom door flew open. 2 large men in dark hoodies and ski masks filled the doorway. I screamed, a raw, primal sound of pure terror. One of them lunged, grabbing me by the hair and yanking me out of bed. I crashed to the floor, the impact knocking the wind out of me. They weren't saying anything. The silence was more horrifying than any threat. They weren't looking for valuables. They weren't grabbing my laptop or the jewelry on my dresser. Their focus was entirely on me. One man pinned my shoulders to the floor with a knee that felt like it was cracking my sternum. The other one took my left arm and twisted it behind my back until a searing, white-hot fire shot from my shoulder to my fingertips, followed by a sickening, wet snap. The pain was so immense, so absolute, that for a second, my vision went black. I was vaguely aware of myself screaming, a sound that seemed to be coming from very far away. As the first wave of agony subsided into a chorus of frantic, throbbing pulses, I saw her. A figure appeared in my bedroom doorway, silhouetted by the faint glow of the streetlights filtering through the hall window. My breath caught in my throat. It was Jessica. She wasn't wearing a mask. Her face was serene, bathed in shadow. She just stood there, watching. She watched as one of the men slapped me across the face, the impact ringing in my ears and sending a fresh wave of nausea through me. She watched as they pinned me down, my body a geography of pain and terror. The concussion came next, a sharp blow to the side of my head that made the world tilt and blur. Then, she walked over. She moved with a slow, deliberate grace, stepping around the men as if they were merely furniture. She knelt down, her face close to mine. I could smell the faint scent of her floral perfume, a scent I used to associate with sisterly hugs. "Now you know your place," she whispered, her voice as soft as silk and as sharp as glass. And then she was gone. The men followed her out. I heard the front door close gently, and then silence. Only the sound of my own ragged, sobbing breaths filled the room. Lying there on the cold hardwood floor, my arm broken, my head swimming in a fog of pain, surrounded by the wreckage of my safe and orderly life, the old Sarah died. The accommodating, people-pleasing, turn-the-other-cheek Sarah bled out right there on the rug. In her place, something new was forged. Something cold, hard, and patient. Waiting for the ambulance, every agonizing, throbbing pulse of my broken arm felt like a tick of a clock, counting down to a reckoning. My police report was a masterclass in frustration. There was no forced entry, they said, just a kicked-in door. No witnesses. No fingerprints. My claim that my sister was there? "Are you sure, Ms. Albright? You mentioned you sustained a significant head injury. It could have been a hallucination." There was no proof she was involved. My parents, when contacted by the police, provided her with an alibi. They claimed she was with them all night, distraught over our fight. They lied to the police for her. Fine, I thought, as I lay in my hospital bed. If the system won't find the proof, I'll build it myself. And I won't just prove the assault. I'll prove everything. My first call after being discharged, my arm in a heavy cast and sling, was not to a therapist, but to a man named Marcus Thorne. He was a private investigator, a name I got from a high-powered attorney my firm sometimes used. Thorne wasn't some seedy gumshoe. He was a former federal agent with a reputation for being discreet, thorough, and utterly ruthless. We met in a sterile coffee shop. I told him everything, holding his gaze, my voice steady and devoid of the tears I had shed for days. I wanted him to see steel, not fragility. "I don't just want to find the men who did this," I told him, my voice low. "I want to know everything about her. Her finances, her associates, her habits. I want to know where she buys her coffee and who she talks to on the phone. I am willing to pay whatever it takes. Your only constraints are the law, and even those are negotiable." A flicker of something, respect, perhaps, passed through his eyes. "I understand," he said simply. While I focused on my physical recovery, attending doctor's appointments and physical therapy sessions that were exercises in controlled agony, Marcus became my ghost. I had a state-of-the-art security system installed in my home, not just the visible cameras, but hidden ones. Micro cameras in smoke detectors, in digital clocks, in faux air fresheners. My home became a fortress and a surveillance hub. My next step was to hire my own lawyer. I didn't want a good lawyer, I wanted a shark. I found her in Evelyn Reed, a woman with a reputation for eviscerating opponents in both family and criminal court. I presented her with my story and my intention. She listened patiently, her face unreadable. "This is not just about the assault," Evelyn said when I finished. "This is about a pattern of manipulation, endangerment, and potential criminal activity. A revenge fantasy is satisfying, but a well-executed legal strategy is devastating. We will build a case so airtight that by the time we are done, she won't know what hit her." For the next 6 weeks, we worked. I became an archivist of my own pain. I spent hours digging through years of old text messages, printing out the endless strings of requests for money, the guilt trips about babysitting, the dismissive apologies. I found the emails from her former landlords. I pulled my old bank statements, highlighting the rent payments, the car payments, the countless cash transfers. I created a meticulous timeline of her exploitation, complete with dates, amounts, and corroborating evidence. It was a multi-page document detailing a decade of emotional and financial vampirism. Meanwhile, Marcus was a phantom, and he was worth every single penny of his exorbitant fee. The picture he painted of Jessica was far darker than I had imagined. She wasn't just irresponsible, she was a dedicated, practicing criminal. He brought me evidence of systematic credit card fraud. She had been a carder, buying stolen credit card numbers on the dark web and using them to purchase high-end electronics and designer clothes, which she would then resell for cash. This was how she funded her spontaneous lifestyle. He also uncovered embezzlement from the small marketing company she worked for. It wasn't sophisticated, just brazen. She was in charge of accounts payable for small promotional items. She had set up a dummy corporation and was submitting and paying fake invoices to her own shell company. Over 18 months, she had siphoned over $70,000. While Jessica was posting filtered, sun-drenched photos from Thai beaches with captions like #LivingMyBestLife and #SpiritualAwakening, Marcus was gathering sworn affidavits from her disgruntled ex-friends, women she had used and discarded, who were more than happy to talk. He was pulling bank statements that showed the flow of embezzled money. And he got the Holy Grail, a photograph. One of his surveillance contacts caught her meeting two men in a dimly lit parking lot 2 days before my attack. The photo was grainy, but it was clear enough. Jessica, handing a thick wad of cash to one of the men whose build perfectly matched the one who broke my arm. We had it all. The assault was just the capstone on a mountain of crime. Evelyn Reed organized it all into a terrifyingly neat and tidy file. We had a criminal case for conspiracy, assault, and burglary. We had a civil case for damages. We had a financial crimes case for embezzlement and fraud. And we had the foundation for a CPS case for child endangerment and neglect. The plan was meticulous, and it was designed for maximum impact. We waited. We let her enjoy her spiritual journey. We let her believe she had won, that she had put me back in my place. We wanted her tanned, relaxed, and smug. Her arrogance would be the perfect kindling for the bonfire we were about to light. Jessica returned after exactly 8 weeks, stepping off the plane with a golden tan, beads in her hair, and an aura of insufferable enlightenment. She was met at the airport by our tearfully relieved parents, who had bought her story that she just needed to get away, after I had been so horribly cruel to her. Liam and Qley, who had been staying with my parents, looked tired and withdrawn. To celebrate her triumphant return, and, in their minds, the mending of our family, my parents decided to throw a massive welcome home party at their house the following Saturday. The entire extended family was invited, aunts, uncles, cousins, along with Jessica's whole coterie of fair-weather friends. It was meant to be a showcase of family unity, a way to paper over the cracks she had created. It was the perfect stage. I received an invitation via a flowery text from my mother, full of hopeful platitudes about letting bygones be bygones. I replied with a simple, "I'll be there." I spent that Saturday morning with Evelyn Reed, going over the final details. She had a copy of the complete file couriered to a specific detective at the local police department, a detective she knew personally and trusted, with instructions to review it and a way to call from her at 8 p.m. sharp. I arrived at the party an hour late, deliberately. The house was buzzing with laughter and music. In the center of the living room, Jessica was holding court. She was animated, waving her tanned arms as she told some wildly exaggerated story about meditating with monks. She was the star, radiant and adored. I walked into the room. My arm was still in a sling, a stark, black symbol of her cruelty against the neutral beige of my sweater. A hush fell over the room almost instantly. The laughter died in people's throats. Conversations sputtered out. All eyes went from Jessica's smiling face to me, to the sling, and back again. The air crackled with unspoken questions. My mother and father froze, their faces a mixture of panic and dismay. They started to move toward me, their expressions pleading, clearly intending to run interference, to manage the situation. Before they could reach me, I raised my free hand and spoke, my voice calm and clear, easily carrying through the sudden silence. "Don't worry," I said, my eyes locked on my sister. "I'm not here to make a scene." A few people exhaled in nervous relief. "In fact, Jessica, I brought you a welcome home present. A little video I put together of what I was up to while you were gone." Jessica's expression was one of smug confusion. She thought I was extending an olive branch, perhaps a pathetic, sentimental slideshow. She even smirked a little. My lawyer, Evelyn, had given me a small, powerful projector and a thumb drive. The night before, I had driven past my parents' house and noted the large, white, empty wall in their living room, the one they used for a photo slideshow during holidays. I had timed this. The party was in full swing. The lights were slightly dimmed for atmosphere. It was perfect. I set the small projector on a side table, plugged in the thumb drive, and aimed it at the wall. With a single click of the remote, a bright, clear image filled the space above the fireplace. It wasn't a slideshow of family photos. The first thing the 100 or so guests saw was crystal clear, high-definition security footage from my bedroom. The timestamp in the corner read 2:13 a.m. The video showed the door flying open, the two masked men rushing in, the violent struggle. A collective gasp went through the room. People recoiled. My aunt covered her mouth with her hand. The video was silent, which somehow made it more horrific. They watched the brutal, silent ballet of violence as my arm was broken. They saw me collapse. And then, the video showed the figure appearing in the doorway. It was a perfect shot from a camera hidden in a smoke detector. It captured Jessica's face, illuminated for a full 10 seconds. Serene. Watching. The room went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop on the thick carpet. No one was breathing. The only sound was the faint whir of the projector. I saw Jessica's face. The tan seemed to drain away, leaving a pasty, greenish pallor. Her smirk was gone, replaced by a mask of pure, horrified shock. I let the image of her face linger on the wall for a full 30 seconds, letting the reality sink into every person in that room. Then I clicked the remote. The video switched to a professionally edited montage Evelyn's team had prepared. It was set to quietly ominous classical music. First, scans of bank statements from the marketing firm, with the siphoned funds highlighted in red, flowing into the account of her shell company. Then, screenshots of her social media, bragging about a new designer bag, with the purchase date matching a fraudulent transaction on a stolen credit card number that Marcus had traced. Then came the sworn, signed affidavits from her ex-friends, their damning words appearing as text on the screen. And then, the finale. The grainy but undeniable photograph taken by Marcus's contact. Jessica, in a parking lot, her face tense, handing a thick envelope of cash to a man whose profile was unmistakable. The man who had pinned me to the floor. As that final, damning image faded to black, leaving the wall blank, a new sound cut through the stunned, tomb-like silence of the room. The clear, authoritative chime of the doorbell. Evelyn's timing was impeccable. My father, moving like a man in a trance, shuffled to the door and opened it. Two police detectives stood on the doorstep, a man and a woman, their expressions impassive and professional. They stepped inside, their eyes scanning the room full of stunned, silent faces until they landed on me. The male detective gave me a slight, almost imperceptible nod. They had received the file. They walked past my father, their footsteps sounding like hammer blows in the silence. They moved directly toward the center of the room, their path parting the crowd of guests like the Red Sea. They stopped directly in front of Jessica. She was frozen, a statue of guilt. Her eyes were wide, darting between the detectives and me. Jessica Albright, the female detective asked, her voice calm but carrying an undeniable weight of authority. Jessica could only manage a choked, gurgling sound. You are under arrest, the detective continued, for conspiracy to commit aggravated assault, burglary in the first degree, and 2 counts of felony child endangerment. The detective took out a pair of handcuffs. The metallic click 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 as she secured them behind Jessica's back was the loudest sound I had ever heard. Jessica didn't scream. She didn't fight or protest. The arrogant, enlightened world traveler was gone. In her place was a trapped animal, stripped of its camouflage. As they began to lead her away, she finally looked at me. The look in her eyes wasn't fear or remorse. It was pure, unadulterated, bottomless hatred. The look of a monster who wasn't sorry for what she did, only that she had been caught. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. Total. As the police car pulled away, taking my sister with it, the party disintegrated. People fled as if the house were on fire, whispering, avoiding eye contact. Her friends vanished into the night, their loyalty as thin as their party smiles. The family members, my aunts, my uncles, my cousins, looked at my parents with expressions of pity and horror before making their own quiet escapes. Within 15 minutes, the house was empty, save for me, my parents, and the scattered remains of a party that had turned into a public execution. The next day, the police, armed with the evidence from our file, contacted Jessica's employer. Faced with incontrovertible proof of embezzlement, the company immediately pressed charges. Her name was wiped from the company directory by noon on Monday. Legally, it was a landslide. Faced with the mountain of evidence, Jessica's court-appointed lawyer advised her to take a plea deal. The plea deal was still harsh. She was sentenced to 8 years in state prison for the conspiracy and assault charges, with the embezzlement case running concurrently. 8 years. 1 year for every week she had planned to be on her spiritual journey. The irony was not lost on me. But the most profound fallout was with my parents. They were broken, utterly humiliated. Their perfect family narrative had been shredded in front of everyone they knew. Their golden child was a felon. Their enabling, their denial, their lies had all been laid bare. They came to my house a week later. They looked like they had aged a decade. They stood on my porch, the same porch where Jessica had stood and demanded my life. Sarah, my mother began, her voice trembling, tears streaming down her face. We are so sorry. We had no idea. We never knew how bad it was. We were wrong. Can you ever forgive us? I looked at them. At my father, his shoulders slumped in defeat. At my mother, her face a crumpled mask of regret. For a fleeting moment, I felt a pang of the old, familiar pity. The ingrained instinct to smooth things over, to comfort them, to say, it's okay. But it wasn't okay. No, I said, my voice as cold and hard as the steel plate in my arm. You're not sorry that you enabled her. You're sorry that you got caught. You're humiliated because everyone else now sees what I was forced to live with for 30 years. I took a step back, creating a physical distance that mirrored the emotional chasm between us. You had an idea, I continued, my voice level. You saw the signs every single day. The missed payments, the wrecked car, the abandoned kids, the constant drama. You just chose not to see it. You chose her, over and over and over again. You lied to the police for her after she had me beaten in my own home. You didn't enable a free spirit. You enabled a monster. That is your choice. Now you can live with the consequences of that choice. I closed the door on their shocked faces. And with that click of the latch, I cut them out of my life as cleanly and decisively as a surgeon excising a tumor. The silence that followed was not empty. It was peaceful. It was free. With Jessica incarcerated and the state officially deeming her an unfit parent based on the mountain of evidence from her criminal trial, the path was clear. I filed for emergency, and then permanent, custody of Liam and Qley. My parents, in a rare act of clarity or perhaps just sheer exhaustion, did not contest it. They knew they had no ground to stand on. Custody was granted. The civil suit I filed against Jessica went to a default judgment. With her assets frozen due to the criminal cases, the court awarded me a significant sum in damages. It wasn't about the money for me, but it ensured that Liam and Qley would have a college fund, that their futures would be secure, bought and paid for by the consequences of their mother's actions. The first thing I did was sell my house. I couldn't sleep in that bedroom anymore. I couldn't walk down that hallway without seeing Jessica's face in the shadows. It was a beautiful house, but it was tainted. It was the scene of the crime, the tomb of the old me. We moved. We packed up our lives and moved 3 states away to a city where no one knew our names or our story. I bought a house with a big, sprawling backyard and a magnificent oak tree that was perfect for a tire swing. We painted the walls in bright, cheerful colors. We got a golden retriever puppy and named him Sunny. The change in the children was like watching flowers turn toward the sun. Liam, who had been so anxious and quiet, started to excel in his new school. He joined the soccer team. Qley, who had always seemed to be holding her breath, started to laugh freely, a beautiful, tinkling sound that filled our new home. We found a wonderful therapist who specialized in children who have experienced trauma and neglect. They are healing. They are learning what it feels like to be in a stable, predictable, and unconditionally loving environment. They are no longer props for their mother's selfish life, but cherished children who have a set bedtime, whose homework gets done, and who are the undisputed center of my world. Sometimes, in the quiet of the evening, when the kids are asleep and the house is still, I think about Jessica, somewhere in a concrete cell. I don't feel anger anymore. I don't feel hatred or even pity. I just feel a cold, vast emptiness where a sister used to be. She tried to break me. She tried to shatter my body and my spirit, to remind me of what she thought was my place. But she failed. Instead, she gave me the two most important people in my life. By trying to take everything from me, she inadvertently gave me a real purpose. She gave me a true family, built not on obligation and guilt, but on genuine love and fierce protection. And in the sound of Liam and Qley's daily laughter, in the warmth of their hugs, and in the quiet rhythm of our peaceful new life, I found my own perfect, satisfying peace. She lost everything. I, on the other hand, gained it all.